Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Min and I'm your co-host with Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Greetings, Debbie.
Hello, man. How are you?
Good. Today, our episode is really a bit of reviewing some information from the quarterly report ending, what was it, March or May? March.
Yep.
But I love the way that Barwon Investments, the institution in Sydney, have put together the information here.
Their snapshot analysis.
Yes. And we call this episode the Key NDIA Data and Insights. Should be SDA data, really. But Debbie, where do we go from here? How's this summarised document that they've posted on LinkedIn? I like it. It's very concise, very simple, very clear, very clean. I love the way it's been presented. Of course, people who love data love putting it in a very professional and succinct manner. What's your impression of the information put in front of us here, Deb?
Yeah, look, it summarises really all the important information on two very clear, concise pages of graphs and tables. So, yeah, I like what they've done a lot.
The two things that, and thank you, Joz from Barwon. Thank you for you guys putting all this together. We always commend all the collaborators in the SDA sector who present and put forward information that helps other stakeholders to discern and break down the information. So what I love about this, Debbie, this document, the 2-page document that Barwon have released, two things. Number one is the fact that of the 700 million of SDA funding, which is basically every year, 542 million has been approved for active SDA funding, but only 411 million is being claimed of the 542 from the 700,000. So Debbie, you want to explain the why 411 or 542 of the 700, please?
Well, the 542 is the amount of funding that's sitting in participants' plans for SDA payments.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that a lot of that is not being claimed.
Because they haven't moved houses.
They haven't moved into an SDA or into the SDA that matches the amount they're funded for.
All their needs.
Yeah, so they might have been living in an older or are living in an older SDA house paying basic funding or group home funding, but they've now been approved for house funding at the new build levels. So it's in their plan, but they've not yet moved in and they can't claim that money until they're living in the appropriate housing.
Enrolled, yeah.
That's been enrolled, that's right.
The second thing that catches my eye on these two documents, Debbie, is the places per participant ratio. And I love it where it says, for example, ACT, 198 SDA News, 0.6 places per participant. 0.6, 0.6, 1.4, 1.7, 1.5. WA, 2.2 places per participant. Wow.
That is the largest number of places enrolled in the whole country.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a surprise. I mean, we knew that there was a lot of stock going into WA, but I guess I didn't quite see it in that way. But when you look at the very simple snapshot of demand versus supply, and I've got to note that this is excluding all robust. So we're just talking about high physical support, fully accessible, improved livability here.
And by the way, folks, I'm not worried about that comment, excludes robust, because there's only roughly 2,000 SDA funded participants.
That's only a small piece of the pie. Yeah, exactly. But when we're looking at state by state, the demand in most states by far still outstrips supply if it's a large state. So New South Wales, SA, Victoria, significantly. Queensland has more supply than demand. WA has a lot more supply than demand. And then the other smaller states have only got minimal amounts that fluctuate either way.
Debbie, about 3 weeks ago, me and Denise were crunching some numbers about Melbourne and Perth. Perth specifically I was after. And I recall, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I recall an astronomical number.
In the Mandurah region, we looked at the number of potential places. So that was all of the places, i.e. rooms in the pipeline properties, plus the places in the new build properties that are already enrolled, versus the number of participants with SDA funding. And it literally equated to 1 in 4 houses or dwellings would have one tenant. So 3 houses will remain empty, and the lucky 1 out of every 4 houses would have one tenant.
Now, that number that we worked out for that little sector there, region there in Perth, Mandurah, included future pipeline being delivered.
That's right, it didn't.
Now, in this number here that the Barwon team put together,
this is only
530 in use. Okay, so for my recollection, again, this is me from a year ago, I think, and my numbers in my head, was potentially 1,300 maximum SDA participants in the long term will be in Perth, maximum. And there are probably 2,500 to 3,000 places that will be delivered in Perth. Now, let's go on the conservative end here. Let's call it 2,500, or call it even 2,000.
Yeah.
2,000 places being delivered in Perth. 530 is what's sitting there in front of us, Debbie. 530 of the 2,000 is still 1 in 4, which is what we thought about. And the reality is, Bosnells, Mandurah, Baldivis.
Bosnells are still okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
But Mandurah, Rockingham was the other area we looked at. Mandurah was a bit different because Mandurah SA3, Mandurah SA4 are almost the same. So the data is very similar. Rockingham is part of the greater Perth Southwest SA4, I think. So we had to kind of guesstimate a little bit more what the pipeline would be in Rockingham, but it came out to 1 in every 2 houses would have one tenant.
Yeah. So look, this episode isn't a knock on Perth. We're just talking about the one region there. And back to the places participant, 2.2. So Debbie, when the pipeline is fulfilled, that 2.2 will go higher and higher. 1 in 3, 1 in 4 maybe. Yeah. So
if the pipeline is filled, let's hope it's not.
Yeah. So I would guess that number will increase to 3. Yeah. Anyway, moving back to the number, they're my two things that stand out to me. What about you, Debbie? What does stand out to you in these 2 documents? Which we'll put a link on the podcast summary for the link towards the Barwon LinkedIn post. But what numbers jump at you here in this document?
Well, it wasn't numbers, but it was the top 5 oversupplied regions, which was the first thing I looked at when the data came out. And there's obviously the data is the data, and they're the 5 regions that I saw. Melbourne West, number 1, Melbourne Southeast, number 2, Adelaide North, number 3, Logan, Queensland, number 4, Ipswich, number 5. So, obviously our data's the same as theirs, the way we're analysing it. And yeah, that was just good to get that clarified by another source that we're reading the data correctly.
But Debbie, just from my perspective, we've been talking about for the last few years now, Melbourne West, oversupplied, Logan, Bradford, oversupplied, Ipswich, we know that. But the dark horses here have been the Southeast Melbourne region and the Adelaide North.
And Adelaide, they exploded so...
They come out of nowhere into this list here.
I think a year ago, I actually did a SDA Unlocked on Melbourne Southeast because there was still so much demand and there was nothing, very little going in there. And bang, all of a sudden, it just exploded. There was obviously a lot of greenfield estates opened up in the area. Likewise, in that Adelaide North region, especially right up in that corridor going up through Manapara, those areas. And it just became an easy place for builders and spruikers to market SDA house and land packages.
So this is a lesson to our investors who are listening, or those people who invest in those areas. Just because you look at the NDIS data quality report on the website and the NDIS, don't think you're the only one looking at it. There'll be another couple of hundred people doing the same thing as you are, and builders the same, and also SDA providers doing the same thing, right, Debbie?
Oh, absolutely. Another case in point was Geelong, the area of Armstrong Creek. And I remember a couple of years ago, we were talking to an investor who was very keen on that area. And at the time, there was another 5 dwellings in the entire area. He is from that region, so he was very well aware of it, loved the proximity of Armstrong Creek to Geelong. also to the coast, had done his research and thought, yeah, this is definitely where I want to build an SDA house. Obviously, everyone else thought the same. And bang, a year later, we had 100 houses in the area.
Maybe we should stop giving this information on the web on this podcast for free, Debbie. All you listeners, delete from your mind.
So look, we're just telling it like we see it at that time. But if you do listen to the Unlocked, I'm always talking about what the potential pipeline going into one area is. But we know that can change drastically from one quarter to the next. Although with what's gone on in the last 9 months in the industry, we know that is changing, as discussed in recent times with the analysis we did on this same quarterly data when we were talking about the pipeline in a previous episode a few releases ago, Min, and also the most recent information on the lending, which is again going to have even more of a restriction on people building in those newer areas further out of the centres of the CBD of the city.
So Debbie, referring back to that podcast you did with Paul Grant recently, the postcode restriction has been removed, and he said to you told me it didn't work. Why didn't the postcode restriction not? How did that not work?
Yeah, well, he actually gave an example, the general example, saying, well, it was in Perth. They had investors looking to build a property 5 kilometres or 8 kilometres from the centre of Perth City, and SDA providers were providing due diligence reports saying, we can fill these, we have demand, it's a high demand area, and yet for some reason it was blacklisted. And I guess this lender kind of had probably a few cases like this and realised that maybe blacklisting specific postcodes in some cases was good, but it wasn't the actual answer. And really, it's what we've been saying, it's proximity to the centre of the cities. It's the inner and mid-ring areas.
Exactly. Well, we can only beat the drum so hard so many times, and if people don't want to listen to us because they don't know about it, the facts and the figures and the advice, then they'll do what they do, and they'll be the ones in the mess, I guess.
Yeah. But I guess just back to the conciseness of this report, please do download it from the description.
Debbie, you want to read a few lines from the sites?
Well, I was just going to go through the tables that they've got up the top here. The first two ones was the participants' demand and the SDA places supply, and just showing from September 22 the growth quarter by quarter, what it looks like. In terms of demand, the participants with funding not using it versus those using it. And then on the supply side, the pipeline plus the new build. So it's a really good, clear indication of how supply is growing, which is very rapidly, and how the demand is growing very, very slowly. Okay, some of the points that they've listed here. Activated SDA funding increased 20% last year, but 131 million or 24% remains unused, highlighting a key opportunity for targeted future SDA supply. But again, this all comes down to, yes, we know the demand is there, but where specifically is the demand? This is very general. All these data, all these stats are literally overall or state by state. So, and where it's, it might sound like a broken drum, is that the right?
Broken record.
Beating the drum. We don't know well enough from the data we're currently getting where that demand really is, but we do our best, as I'm sure a lot of other organisations do, to pick through the data, read between the lines, use all sorts of other sources out there as well to get more clarity on that. But anyway, in the March 2025 quarter, enrolled SDA places grew 2.4 times faster than active participants, with 1,060 new places enrolled versus 411 new funded participants. So this is the sort of growth we're seeing quarter on quarter. Nothing's new here, really. 60% of SDA supply pipeline consists of houses, compared to 46% of the currently enrolled dwellings, indicating a sharp shift away from other building types. So that's I guess, indicating that less apartments and villas are going in, which is interesting. Again, it's pipeline. We know that pipeline is effectively reflecting what was starting construction 6-9 months, even more ago, or going into the system that long ago.
Yeah.
Just because of the delay it takes to actually eventuate and come to ground. And I'm hoping that a lot of those homes won't actually be built because most of that pipeline is in areas we don't need it.
Yeah.
A sharp decline in group homes, representing only 5.5% of pipeline versus 13% of enrolled places, likely reflecting the NDIS review's recommendation to phase them out. Oh, this is interesting. Over the next 15 years. I don't remember ever seeing that time frame anywhere in the NDIS's recommendations.
There's a correction there, Debbie. I do recall Bill Shorten saying, this is 2 years ago, maybe they might extend the group home thing. It was a maybe. So with reference to that comment from years ago from Bill to this comment now about 15 years, that's probably where it is. They may not be phasing it so quickly as we had thought.
Yeah, look, we know they basically just have to wait for new stock in the right places.
You can't get them out unless...
You can't kick them out unless there's somewhere for participants to move into. So it's different to the legacy homes, which are being defunded, and we know the time frames for each jurisdiction when that's going to happen, and that's coming up over the next 4 years, basically. But yeah, group homes, yeah, look, it's good to see that there's far less entering the pipeline, essentially.
I'm still surprised with the fact that 24,761 participants are still front of SDA. So the last 3 years, it's been 24,000-ish.
Yeah, it stayed in that 24,000 bracket. It sort of dropped a little bit, I think, the previous quarter or the one before that, but it has not grown much.
And 15,100 are in use. So still there's 10,000-ish participants are still not pulling down their SDA through the portal.
Exactly. That's a lot of participants that can't find the right housing for whatever reason.
So on the next little column here on page 1 here, Debbie, so 13,213 enrolled new build SDA places.
Yep.
And there's 15,643 pipeline build SDA. Wow.
So that will be almost 29,000 places for less than 25,000 participants. But of course that enrolled, that is new build.
New build, yeah. It's amazing how, Debbie, think about this for a second, 13,213, so 13,000 new builds have been completed in the last 5 years. 13,000.
8 years, 9 years. Yeah. 6, majority is delivered.
That's 6-7 years, right? There you go. And with 15,500 coming out in the next 2 years. So basically we're getting six years worth of products being delivered the next year and a half compared to 6 years ago. So wow, that's a lot. That shows a lot of product coming through for SDA, new builds coming out.
We know that the majority of it is not the product that's needed.
Yeah.
So it's going to, if the majority of that pipeline does eventuate, I think that the uncertainty in the industry is going to continue for quite some time in terms of investment. There's going to be a lot of investors going to have to find alternate uses for their properties. They're going to have to go back into the regular market.
I want to remind all our listeners who may not know this, but they should know this. This has been mentioned many times over in the Housing Hub documentations or webinars. 70% of all SDA participants live in Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne, all right? So if you're in Tasmania or Adelaide or Perth or Townsville or Darwin, you are in trouble because there's not much participants in those areas for the inflow of capital to build all that product out there. So a safe bet is the Metro Eastern Seaboards. Now, Debbie, tell me about this recent podcast with you and Paul Grant. Where is the lender focusing on?
Sydney.
There you go, Sydney.
Which we've been talking about for
years.
And specifically the last few months, very much being bullish on Sydney.
We have been you who've been listening to our podcast know that we've been talking Melbourne for 3 years and we've been talking Sydney for a year now, if not longer, a year and a half now. So we are ahead of the game here. We are. And I'm not trying to beat our own drum, right? And I don't want to sound like a broken record. There you go. How's that for a bit of a script, eh? But, you got to know the data and the trends. And if you follow the herd, guess what, Debbie? What happens when you follow the herd, Debbie?
Well, you get trampled.
So in my mind,
If you
you see a cliff right, on cartoons on TV, right? The herd runs, they're all running off each other and they fall off the cliff. Everyone keep running off each other's cliff. Oh my God.
Yeah. Look, it's obvious when we look at the data all the time and see these trends, but there's just been so little development in the biggest market, Sydney. And that means that the undersupply there is growing. It's not shrinking.
And as a result, you're reading the lender or lenders, they're evolving their compliance and approvals, right, to meet the demand of the market, which is 25-kilometre radius on the Metro CBD.
Or 50 if it's Sydney.
So they are controlling the movement of investment funding as well. There you go. So,
Yeah.
But, back to these numbers again, SDA news places per participant, ACT 0.6, New South Wales 0.6, Northern Territory 1.6, Queensland 1.4, SA 0.7, Tasmania 1.4, Victoria 0.5, well that's pretty good, and WA 2.2. WA concerns me, really does, yeah.
It is definitely a worry, but look, this SA it looks deceptive. It looks like there's not that much supply there, but we know that also Adelaide North is the third most oversupplied part of Australia. But yes, other parts of South Australia are undersupplied. But it's because it is a much smaller market than, say, Melbourne or Sydney, you do need to be far more careful about where you're looking at moving into in that area.
Debbie, I want to read this line here on the next page here. The number of enrolled SDA places, 13,312, could double within 24 months to 36 months if all pipeline places, 15,643, are delivered and made available. However, 20 to 30% of the SA4 regions of Australia would still be undersupplied and should be prioritised for new development.
Yeah.
So, Debbie, what's your opinion right now on the spot where these 20-30% SA4 regions are that are undersupplied, could be undersupplied?
Well, the majority definitely in New South Wales.
Regional,
and Sydney, the vast majority. But then you do have some more regional pockets, maybe in Victoria, in maybe one or two regions in WA. But I mean, you're talking areas where it's, a large land area for one SA4, and it's undersupplied because it's just too hard to deliver an SDA home up in Port Kembla or Port Hedland is the one I was thinking of. So yeah, by far the majority, even Queensland, there's only a couple of the more regional SA4s, but they're really small numbers when we're talking about the undersupply, the supply versus the demand. So really, most of those SA4 regions, I would say, are in New South Wales.
Yeah. Speaking of regional, Debbie, can I make a request for our next SDA Unlocked episode, please? Barwon, New South Wales. Is that a place you can look into?
Barwon's part of the Shoalhaven SA3. It includes Mittagong and Mossvale, I think. But I think that could be a good...
Those who don't know where Barwon is, where is Barwon?
It's just southwest of Sydney, inland from Wollongong, I suppose.
How many kilometres?
Maybe 100.
You should southwest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
100 kilometres. So what? An hour and a half drive? 2 hours?
Hour and a half, 2 hours drive, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, top of my head. I'm sure someone will correct me. I've got those details a little wrong, but it's definitely southwest of Sydney, southwest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually looking at the data this morning. We were speaking to someone looking at doing a development there. And yeah, there's very little supply. It's an SA3 within one of the SA4s that has very little supply and a lot of participants with SDA funding.
And we're talking about this barrel topic as a SDA unlock because one of our clients called us the last few days and wants to do a development feasibility on a large block of land in that location. So again, thank you for the inquiry, Peter. We love to work with you and provide you that development analysis and feasibility on that site to help you develop the right appropriate accommodation there. Now, Debbie, the last line of the document, read that document, the last line there.
Okay, the last line is Barwon estimates that a significant portion of SDA may need to be unenrolled and sold into the mainstream residential market due to oversaturation in some SA4 regions, poor access to care providers, and not built to best practice design standards, which may address the balance of oversupply in some areas. That's exactly what I was saying, that there'll be alternate use required to be found for some properties.
We should do a podcast on those very points there. Not built to best practice design.
And poor access care providers.
Yeah. So oversaturation. Yeah. The topic should be oversaturation, what's happened and how to move on from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, this is just a really interesting snapshot.
It's good how we have people out there in the marketplace coming to the market with their view on the data. It just simply confirms what we know and helps us feel better that we're talking the right thing.
Yeah. It's always good to get that verification that we're reading the stats right and our analysis of it is on par, because all this is basically what we've been saying.
Debbie, hopefully we'll get this information snapshotted and cropped and put it to our website as well with reference to Barwon, because obviously Barwon is only using the information from the quarterly report anyway, which is the NDIS reports. And by the way, Debbie, you said today that July next week or 2 weeks with the new calculator.
Yeah, well, the new calculator will be valid. The new SDA funding calculator will be valid as of 1st of July. Now, from memory, it generally doesn't come out before the 1st of July. We often get it a week or two or more later, and obviously payments are backdated to the 1st of July if relevant. But it goes up by CPI every year.
Do you expect much of them?
I think CPI this year is about 3%. Last year it went up 3.4%.
3% for the year?
For the year.
So this is the quarter. You don't expect much of a...
No, it jumps up by the full annual CPI at July.
Oh, okay, my bad. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So all those figures for the SDA funding figures will go up by around 3%.
I can't wait to see this fire sprinkler income go up by 3%.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't do anything else with the funding changes, except maybe for something like, I think, Appendix H change 2 years running.
Do they manipulate the location factor at this point?
No, we've only ever seen that change at
5 years.
First 5-year review that we've only had once, which is now 2 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've still got 3 years before any major changes, unless they decide to review the pricing for SDA before that 5-year review time is up.
Exactly. Okay, cool. Debbie, anything else to cover before we hang up on this episode today?
No, I don't think so.
We have a lot of topics to come out with in the coming 2 months, and I think we will be pushing for 2 episodes per week because we have a lot to cover. Yeah. If only you knew what we have coming out, you'd be very excited, but time will tell.
And all the time we sit here in the boardroom looking at different reports, coming across different information, discussing it, calling people for clarification. Yeah.
And today, Debbie, what did we spend time about today, which will be a podcast topic in its own right?
Certainly. Well, when we get our head around it, on-site supports and OOA models and concierge in the apartment complex model.
How it works with apartment funded, not apartment funded, the viability of care supports on a site if they are drop-in supports versus concierge model, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're here 4 years later. We're still trying to get our head around it.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So this whole world's always changing all the time for NDIS, and we're trying to learn as much as we can, and we're trying to share the information to you, our listeners. And if you have any, if you have any corrections of information today we presented today, please let us know so we can correct it. And if calling out to anyone out there, if you are an OSS, on-site shared supports, or also known as concierge specialist, please give us a call. Let us know about your thoughts, your experiences. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
We would love to, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.